Brought to you in association with Grendel Press. This is Werewolf the Podcast, a serial killer drama.
Gentlemen, welcome to Fight Club. Gentlemen, welcome to Fight Club. The first rule of Fight Club is, you do not talk about Fight Club. You do not talk about Fight Club. You do not talk about Fight Club. The second rule of Fight Club is, you do not talk about Fight Club.
Hello, you lovely lunatics. This is Werewolf the Podcast, and this is yet another episode in our medieval stage of the werewolf's history. William Marshal going to find the wyrm. Follow us on all the social media and stuff if you want to. It's all down in the description. You can buy books. You can talk to us on the Facebook group. You can just do whatever you want. If you'd like to share us, that would be wonderful. If you want to follow us on the platform that you listen to us, that would be great. There are comments you can give. There are reviews. You can be part of this amazing thing that is happening. Werewolf the Podcast. So, back to the story. Bye. Well, not bye, because I won't, because you, yeah, I'll show up.
So, here I am, somewhere in the wilds. I have a bull on a chain around its neck with the anchor of a small boat dangling from it. Percy, Gervais, Fenrir and I sit a length or so from the cave mouth, waiting. I know this sounds awfully strange to you, but we were literally anglers in this case. No, not anglers of the river. No fish was our prize on this outing. We were fishing for dragon. I know, it seems like a mad statement to make, but here we sit, waiting for the creature to take the bull we use as bait. Let us move to the future moment when I returned home to the Château de Tancerville. I walked into William de Tancerville's reception room. It was a large, imposing room with huge, rich tapestries and all the fixings of a wealthy nobleman. He was reading and busy, and I thought that I would make a statement. I threw the sack that was in my hand on the table in front of the Lord de Tancerville. It was a somewhat bloody sack. Well, it was a very bloody sack and the source of a vile stench after its weeks on the road. It bounded with a thud, leaving a bloody and worse trail where it had made contact with the wood. My lord looked up and then a little affronted at this. I had probably been a bit too daring, doing the throwing like. Seemed like an impressive manner of bringing him the news, though.
Well, that was a mistake, wasn't it?
Said my invisible wolf soul in my mind.
What is this, Will?
Asked de Tancerville, his anger apparent. Yes, by his tone, I had undoubtedly done the wrong thing. It is the golden fleece that I got as a reward for my efforts, sir, I said as I approached the dais where he sat. I agree it's not as beautiful as we thought, or as golden at the moment, but it was as close to the fleece as we could get. I sat myself on the edge of his table while he stared at the bloody bag before him.
The old man ain't gonna like this level of presumption either, Will.
Again, a note from my best friend Fenrir.
May I ask why so bloody?
De Tancerville asked, running a finger through the blood track that the bag had left, then lifting that digit and showing me the mess on its tip. I tried to show a little contrition with my look. Oh, well, it was a bloody awful mission, sir, I replied, trying to make a jest of the situation. It did not work. My lord harumphed, his disapproval clear while he stared at me sitting on the edge of the table. It took a while for me to realise that he didn't want me to sit on the edge of the table, and it was with a little embarrassment in front of his guards that I removed myself from it and took a couple of steps back before facing him again while sorting my surcoat.
Told you, William. You need to bloody listen to me, right?
Said Fenrir. Eventually the old man's grey's eyebrows unknotted, and he nodded his approval at me. You have to remember I was young at this point and sometimes overstepped my boundaries. I should really listen to Fenrir. I really should. The men behind him were smirking and holding attention. My behaviour seemed to have reached an acceptable level now. Eventually, with his disapproval evident, he opened the bag and looked inside. He stared at its contents for a while, trying to figure out what it was. His face changed to a look of surprise, and then disgust. He stood up quickly, his seat shooting backwards from beneath him, and with a flash of anger in his face, he shot me a stare that knocked me a little with its violence.
What in God's name is the meaning of this?
He asked. I was ready for this and beamed. Somehow, this cooled his wrath. My smile often did that to folk. He drew his seat back under him and leant back in his chair, lifting a cup as if to wash away what he'd seen from his mouth.
Okay. Bring forth a chair, William, and sit upon it. This is obviously going to be some sort of fascinating story,
he said, while he filled another cup and placed it where I was to sit. So let me tell you that story. A few months before this, my lord had asked me to meet him in his living quarters. He said he had something special that he needed to talk to me about, so I met him that evening. He asked me to join him for a game of cards, to discuss a journey that he wanted me to undertake. As we played, he began to tell me a story.
Have you heard of a town in Aquitaine called Perigord, William?
He asked. I laid 3 cards down and picked 3 from the deck to replace those in my hand. I have not, sir, I told him. He laughed.
Astonishingly honest as always, William. Well, the local lord there, the Count of Perigord, has lost his mind. He is saying that in the caves close by that there is a worm of all things.
He paused and looked at me to see what effect this incredible news would have on me. I just stared at my hand of cards while I saw through Fenrir's eyes that the Lord smiled at my lack of response. He offered me the decanter of wine. I took it, refilled my cup, and had a drink. Still smiling, he placed his cards and collected more as he enjoyed the fact that he was winning and that I did not seem shocked or concerned about him mentioning a dragon of all things. I do not want to disparage a nobleman, sir, but it seems like he's gone mad then, sire, I replied.
It does seem so, but he is an old friend of mine, and I do want to offer him some kind of support for this madness. I'd like to send you and maybe a few of my retinue to go and help him with his madness. You never know. He might be right.
He smiled.
You could be as famous as St. George if you bring me a dragon's head.
He continued as he laid his cards on the table.
Ah, I win again. Sorry, William.
He laughed. Oh, God help me, I thought as I looked at his winning hand. I owed him so much already from all my losses. Aquitaine is a long journey for a joke, my lord, I told him as I dropped my cards on the table and gathered the pack to sort and reshuffle for the next game.
It is indeed, but he is offering a vast reward. He says he has a golden fleece of all things, made in homage to the Greek stories. I believe it is a very precious piece, and I know you could do with the money in your coffers if you were to meet and kill a so-called worm. I believe you could do with some money in your coffers. You could do with it, couldn't you, William?
I laughed and nodded. I certainly could, my lord. I certainly could.
Maybe I could even get my horse back if you are successful.
He laughed.
And as your lord and friend, if it is a false journey, then I do promise to make it worthwhile. I will let you keep my best damned horse,
he said with a somewhat exasperated tone. I will hold you to that, lord, I replied, looking at him.
You will also be able to afford to pay me back what you owe me from your badly played games, William, won't you?
To which we both laughed. The next morning, we set off for Aquitaine. I will not go into the details of the journey, as it was long and tedious and had little or no violence. Fenrir had the most fun, as he ran wild in the woods. Sadly, the brigands that we were told to look for on the road tried none of their cowardly business with us. Our colours were well known, so they let us be. They obviously faded into the forests once they saw us on the road. I had taken on Llewellyn as my squire, Welly as we called him. He was a strong lad who was either brave or an idiot. I did not know which at this moment. Maybe if this journey actually had the wyrm waiting for us, we would find that out. A wyrm, a dragon. Ridiculous, a wasted journey. But if my Lord de Tancerville kept his promise, it would be well worth it for me. I patted my destrier's neck. Well, he would be my destrier soon enough. I'd heard of dragons only in stories, a race of gigantic creatures that was scaled like a snake. Some had wings, some had legs. They seemed to be a complicated group of beasts. I had seen a skeleton of such a creature many years before. Its bones were made of the elements of the earth. They were stone, and nothing of their flesh remained, just a huge, bony image of what the creature might have been. It had been found in caves and brought to a local monastery, where the monks pieced it back together as proof of the validity of the wyrm's existence. There were no longer any living examples known of. Why, I knew not, but I'd never heard of any such creature in my lessons or in news from other lands, so I assumed this would be a fruitless journey. There were 3 knights, baggage, and the followers we would need for this journey in our retinue. Gervais, my friend, was with me. A large, blonde-haired bear of a man. Overly fond of wine and women he was. But he was good with a blade and loyal. He was fun to have in the group, although we became much embittered at the lack of his favourite things on this journey. Apparently a man was not supposed to sleep in the wild. We had buildings for a reason, so he told me. I suppose he was right, but I must admit, I rather liked the nights below the canvas in the wild. It allowed me to explore the locals in my wolf form. The other knight was Percy. He was a tall, lanky man who'd lost his hair at the tender age of 20 winters, and at 24 he looked like he was 40. I liked to travel with Percy. He could play his zither and sing very well, and his storytelling was exceptional. I liked Percy a lot. It would be a tiresome journey without him, jesting and bragging about the women he pretended to have bedded. He was apparently the rider of over 100 females. An impressive feat at the age of 24, I think. After weeks on the road, we finally reached Aquitaine and the town of Périgueux. There we met with the local bishop, who was a dull and devout man, before meeting with the Count of Périgord. The bishop was ensconced in the grand cathedral in the town, and I spent many hours within its walls, happily praying and giving thanks to God. It felt a relief to be in God's house once again after the journey through the wild. The bishop, a holy man, vouched that the wyrm was real. It lived in a cave system called Grotte de Marshal near the Dordogne river, and it reigned terror over several villages in the area. It took livestock, and after a knight called Brost was sent to hunt and kill it, it destroyed a local town, killing its entire populace in a night of fire and blood. It was horrific revenge that it took on those people, apparently, leaving only one of the local priests to tell the story and offer its demands to the local nobles. After being rudely dealt with, it wanted women of noble birth to be provided as a sacrifice, one every 6 months. Why is it always a noblewoman? Must be that it hurts the important people in the area, I suppose. Or maybe they're tastier because of their better upbringing and nobility. Who knows? But I probably would not have been here if it had just been wanting peasant girls. That seems rather unfair to me. But the balance of power in this world is unjust, and I have been on the receiving end of a lack of status. I will do something about that one day, but not now. I still had to prove myself. This was a gift. As well as the sacrifice of a maiden, there would be cattle and sheep which were to be left at the opening to its fetid home every month. 6 cows and 12 sheep. This would hurt the peasants, as the stock of the ruling classes would not be given to the beast. Only theirs. Still unfair. This information from this man of God changed things for us. The bishop would not lie. This meant the joke we had been enjoying on our journey, the fun we'd been thumbing our noses at on the travel, was no joke. It was real. Percy had written a hilarious ditty about the dragon of Dordogne, culminating in it being the spitting part of the Count's manhood. A little vulgar, I grant you, but sang before us men it was very amusing. The song now needed to change its lyrics to fit the real story, and the men listening would no further laugh, but quail at it. At the point this truth was discovered, the other knights with me seemed to have other things on their minds than fighting the beast. I think it gave them fear that this creature truly existed. In Fenrir's and my mind, it was going to be an incredible thing to do. To take that wyrm in the dark and win that fleece. I would fight this thing and take its head, I would. I would win the fleece for my lord and get more worth in his eyes. The Count de Périgord was a proud man. His home was fine, and he had many children and a beautiful wife. A very beautiful wife. Grudgingly, he had agreed to the wyrm's terms with many more of the local nobles. He had agreed that the wyrm would have a noble lady every 6 months, and that this would be done by lottery from the local house nobles that were in the area. The problem was that the third lottery winner, in this case the loser, had been his own daughter, his beloved Emma. She was a captivating flower of his loin, which he doted upon. He had not cared for the loss of the other nobles. He had not cared for the loss of the local peasant community at the taking of their beasts. But this was his daughter, for God's own sake. We sat at his table to sup. He was distraught with the coming loss of his little Emma, he was, and he treated us like heroes that we were not yet.
You cannot fail,
he told us.
You have to succeed, or the monster will burn down my home. It is a wily and intelligent beast. It has the mind of the devil, and will play tricks and will not easily fall into traps.
The Count told us. As more information was regaled upon us, Percy took on somewhat of a green hue, whilst Gervais and I got excited at the concept of battle. A battle of the beast. Halfway through this strange evening, a large sack was wheeled into the hall. The sack was dropped from its large cart to the floor in the centre of the room. When I say large sack, I really do mean very large. It could easily have held my horse. As the sack rolled to the ground, we could see it held vast weight. 12 strong men came forward to the sack and carefully split it with knives. It revealed a most beautiful sight. A golden-haired fleece shone in the many lights of the gigantic room. Not only was there gold spun into the fine threads that resembled the hair, but the fleece sparkled with precious stones. It was one of the most beautiful objects I have ever had the honour of seeing, and it really took my breath away, it did. For the Count to put this incredible thing up for the killing of the dragon increased the intensity of the fire in my heart to do the deed. I would be made as a man if I won this day. The crowd was excited and conversation thundered about the room. The Count eventually got to his feet and waved those present into silence before pointing at the split treasure on the floor.
Quiet! Quiet! This, my friends, is the fleece I had made. Pure gold spun to represent the wool of it. Diamonds in their thousands depict the droplets of rain that fell upon the surface of it. This, kind sirs, will be yours if you defeat the dreadful foe.
Cheers filled the room.
This golden fleece is the greatest representation of my wealth, and I would happily be parted from it for your work.
He told the assembled throng with some sadness. I looked to my fellows and saw Gervais's face was full of avarice. Percy was frozen, a cup at his lips. Fenrir, the wolf soul, was walking around the fleece unseen to all those present. His mind was in wonder at what he saw. He was always much more paranoid about these things than I was. I wanted it. I know, a folly of a young man thinking wealth and notoriety were everything. I suppose at that age, and to me, it was. The fleece was left there as the night's festivities went on. Percy sang a song of home to much wonder of those many present. He would not be alone in his slumber this evening, judging by the rapture of some of those looking on. Gervais was his usual self, lost in cups and pontificating about great war strategies with other nobles and knights of the Count's retinue. He recounted a web of near truths about his abilities as a warrior. The night was pleasant, and I had already asked my wolf soul to go and find the nest of this wyrm so we could get some information on the beast before planning its demise. This was one of the great things that having the wolf soul could offer. He could travel unseen to any point and send back what he sensed about the place into my mind. It took the wolf until morning to get to the caves where the creature was said to live. The entrance was vast at the base of a cliff and strewn with the putrid litter of the dragon's meals. Beast's bones were mixed with those of its human victims in vast piles at either side of the entrance of the cave. Those bones were a warning from the creature about what would be the outcome of entering the home of such a thing. The piles were large and worm and fly-ridden. I could use the wolf's soul senses with him and get a picture of the place, and the smell was truly abhorrent. Even being so many miles away, that stench made me want to vomit, and I reached for my piss pot just in case. Fenrir left a wide berth around these warnings as he investigated the entrance carefully. He was not threatened by the beast inside, as he was not a physical being. He was just as if a ghost. He could walk through things of the physical plane, much like a spectre, or in this case, the angel that he was. The entrance to the cave had been widened by raking claws. What claws they must have been. The scars of those deep talons had left deep raking cuts in the stone, in the very stone of this place. What could they do to flesh if they could rake such things as rock? Fenrir smirked as he saw them.
Those things won't damage me, William, but if they touch you, you're going to become many pieces, me friend.
He always thought that his style of jest was amusing, and he also knew that if I felt fear over something, I would be more likely to want to face it. That I would like to be tested by it. It was his way to sharpen my mind for the quest. I will not let them touch me then, Fenrir. I will touch them without return.
I certainly bloody hope so, William, because you'll need more than one coffin if you don't.
He laughed. I smirked. I was getting excited to see the creature that had made this pretty mess. Fenrir wandered into the cave. Fortunately for us, his eyes were made for twilight and darkness. He could see almost as well in the dark as he could in the day. He followed a furrow in the stone of the ground as it went deeper into the caves. As he travelled, he passed pictures on the wall. Men had been here before, it seemed. There were simple drawings on the wall representing men and beasts of the locality. They looked very ancient. He continued to follow the groove on the floor and started to hear the deep breathing of something gigantic. With each breath the thing took, the air currents of the cave were disturbed. Air was pushed past the soul on each exhale and drawn back with each inhale. The cave was enormous, so God only knew how large this thing must be. And then it was there. A gigantic wall of scales, green and large as a man's hand they were. The dragon was hunkered into a space in the cliff wall. That was all that could be seen. When gone to ground, the creature obviously pushed itself into this gap. Maybe for comfort. I could not see this creature needing this retreat to be safe from attack. What would attack this behemoth? Oh, me. The monster was not lying on a pile of treasure as I expected. The floor was clear. It had obviously been scraped clean by the beast's transit in and out of this space. The scales of its skin looked hard and much thicker than the plates we wore. I could not imagine any weapon piercing this reptilian armor. So this was it. The wyrm. Its body was huge, going from the floor to the top of what Fenrir could see at the ceiling. The visible piece of it was some 10 feet tall, which gave us no clue of its actual size. The stench in the place was sulphurous, combined with that of rotting flesh. I still did not fear the monster. I was intrigued by it. I needed to see its whole being, but how could I do that as it hid in this hole? I see you, came a sibilant voice to Fenrir's ears. Fenrir turned to the place where he felt that voice had come from. It was behind. The soul turned to what seemed to be a passageway. Deep in that dark were two glittering red lights. Like giant rubies under candlelight, those red orbs glittered. As Fenrir focused and reflected on what they were, he realized they were the beast's eyes. The eyes then shone brighter and became larger as the head of the dragon moved forward slightly within the dark passage.
"I see you, wolf,"
said the voice that could only be that of the monster. The next moment, without warning, the snake-like head launched itself forward and snatched with a huge gaping maw at the wolf. Fenrir did not flinch as the jaws closed around him. Why would he? He could not be hurt. He could not be touched. The giant snake-like head laughed with pleasure at taking the wolf. But what was this? It had nothing to grasp. No thing was in its mouth. The beast's neck and head quickly retreated back to their home in the depths of the passage, hissing its disapproval at this outcome. It could see the wolf was still there, exactly where it had been when it had leapt at him. Fenrir, and I as his twin, could almost taste its confusion, and we projected an element of smugness. The worm felt a little fear. It would feel more before this conversation was over.
"Why can I not consume you?"
asked the dragon.
"'Cause I'm here to consume you,"
laughed the wolf.
"I'm here as part of a quest to take your bloody head, worm. You've gone too far, and you're going to pay for your impudence. I give you the choice to submit. It'll be a quick death if you do, a noble death as you pay for your crimes against man around here. It's the only chance I'm going to give you. Choose well,"
continued Fenrir. I could hear all this happening in my head and knew Fenrir was improvising such a story. It was such a good falsehood if a falsehood can be thought of as good.
"I will never submit to such weak creatures. You attacked me, so you owe me for your own impudence,"
said the worm.
"Oh, the creatures that come for you are no mere men. They're sent by Lord God himself."
I did not like this lie. It brought me displeasure, but I know these things must be done at times.
"What are they then?"
The dragon asked dismissively. Despite his dismissive tone, his concern was apparent.
"They are your death,"
said Fenrir to the monster. The laughter that Drake gave echoed in the cave.
"I think not,"
it said.
"I've issued you with the opportunity to save yourself some pride. Now you're gonna die like the bloody worm you are,"
said the wolf as he turned his tail and left the cave.
"Bring me my food, and I may let your so-called heroes live. And they..."
shouted the dragon, although his voice now lacked confidence. Oh, how Fenrir and I laughed. We had disturbed the worm, but now we would have to kill it. That is why I have a bull on a chain. That is a collar around its neck, with the anchor of a small boat dangling from it. Percy, Gervais, and I sit a length from the cave mouth, waiting. After today's story, I hope this does not sound so strange to you, but we are anglers. No fish our prize, though. We are fishing for dragon. I know. It seems like a mad statement to make. But here we sit, waiting for the creature to take the bull we use as bait. And when it does, what then? God in heaven only knows.
Brought to you in association with Grendel Press. This is Werewolf the Podcast, a serial killer drama.